Hello and welcome back to another episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. Studies routinely show that reading your Bible regularly significantly lowers symptoms of depression, anxiety, and anger, whilst also increasing compassion, forgiveness, and a sense of purpose. So if you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. And I'm really sorry, but today I actually don't have a desk to sit on, so I'm just doing this on a chair. So if you hear some slight inconvenient noises, it's basically my microphone and me touching my microphone a little bit too much. That's why you're hearing what you're hearing, but hopefully it's not too bad and we can get through it. It's only going to be for today, I think, and then we'll be back to normal ASAP. But for today, what we're going to be going through is Exodus chapter 33. So in Exodus 33, what happened? Well, we are going to see a few things which are quite important. It's going to narrate the crisis and response that happened after the golden calf incident, which is what we saw yesterday. And God warns Moses he will not go up with Israel because of their sin. And again, Moses is going to plead for God's presence, insisting that without God's presence, the people's journey is actually meaningless. So God is going to speak on behalf of the Israelites. And Moses sets up the tent of meeting outside the camp, and there God meets with him face to face as a man speaks to his friend. And Moses intercedes boldly on behalf of the Israelites. So that is going to set up what's going to happen here. So a bit of context, the golden calf is what we saw in the previous chapter. Basically, God saved the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. He takes them out, and because Moses is taking a long time with God, the Israelites decide to fashion a golden calf to worship rather than the one true God. And if we remember in Exodus 20, where we saw the 10 commandments, right? They broke basically two of them. Worship the one God and not any false gods. So that's the first one. And the second one is do not create for yourself any idols. So first two commandments shattered, and then upon hearing this, Moses shatters the two tablets on the ground, signifying the breaking of the covenant between Israel and God. So this is what's the important thing to remember here. This is a theological turning point. Israel's sin has jeopardized God's presence and the sign of covenant life between them. And Moses' intercession and God's mercy again reopen the way for God to dwell amongst his people. And Exodus 33 is going to explore presence, that is, God is with us, and mediation, Moses' role in mediating. So without further ado, let's read Exodus 33. The Lord said to Moses, "Go, leave this place, you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt, and go to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your descendants I will give it, and I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go up among you, or I would consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people." When the people heard these harsh words, they mourned, and no one put on ornaments, for the Lord had said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, you are a stiff-necked people. If for a single moment I should go up among you, I would consume you. So now take off your ornaments, and I will decide what to do to you." Therefore the Israelites stripped themselves of their ornaments from Mount Horeb onward. Verse 7. Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp. He called it the tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, and all the people would rise and stand, each one of them at the entrance of their tents, and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord would speak to Moses. When all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise and bow down, all of them at the entrance of their tent. Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then he would return to the camp, but his young assistant Joshua, son of Nun, would not leave the tent. Verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, "See, you have said to me, bring up this people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my sight. Now if I have found favor in your sight, please show me your ways, so that I may know you and find favor in your sight. Consider, too, that this nation is your people." He said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." And he said to him, "If your presence will not go, do not bring us up from here. For how shall it be known that I have found favor in your sight, I and your people, unless you go with us? In this way we shall be distinct, I and your people, from every people on the face of the earth." Verse 17. The Lord said to Moses, "I will also do this thing that you have asked, for you have found favor in my sight, and I know you by name." Verse 18. Moses said, "Please show me your glory." And he said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and will proclaim before you the name, the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for no one shall see me and live." And the Lord continued, "See, there is a place by me, where you shall stand on the rock, and while my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." Alright, time for some deep biblical unlocks now. So, interesting chapter. What we go through is we'll go through 1 to 3, verses 1 to 3, 4 to 11, 12 to 17, and then 18 to 23. So, in verses 1 to 3, God tells Moses to leave Pharaoh's land and go toward the promised land. But he also says, "I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people." So this is the immediate sort of sting of the golden calf incident. That is to say, God is now no longer willing to go in their midst because they worshipped an idol. They made a they made a golden calf to worship and bow down to, rather than the one true God. So the consequence of idolatry, putting something above God, is relational. That is, it hinders or destroys the relationship that you have with your God. So God's presence is just jeopardized. So when you have a political or material meaning, right? When you have a win without God, it's a hollow victory. You don't have the security of God's presence when you give it all up for something which is so much less meaningful. And in this case, we also see that God's judgment is not merely retributive cruelty. He's not punishing them without any form of justification, but it's actually protective holiness. He withdraws his presence because unholy people cannot safely remain in the immediate presence and nearness of a consuming God. But think about it, right? God is just, and if he was to enact his just judgment on this people, he would have to consume all of them because of what his justice demands, what the laws of the Torah command. It says, honor your mother and father. It says, do not worship any other gods. It says, do not commit idolatry. And yet he broke all of them. He broke 2 of these commandments. So the Israelites should be punished, but God refuses to go near them because if he was to go near them, he would have to punish them. That is another case where God shows his justice, but he does not want to consume them. Then in verses 4 to 11, Moses removes the people's ornaments and later sets up a tent of meeting outside the camp. Whoever sought the Lord would go to the tent. When Moses enters the tent, the pillar of cloud, right, the Lord's sign descends, and the Lord speaks with Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. When Moses leaves, he blesses the people. So the tent of meeting here becomes an appointed place for encountering God, and even as God's public presence is actually no longer present with them, there is fellowship between God and Moses that remains possible because of the tent of meeting. And the language here, face to face, is quite remarkable. He says Moses' leadership is actually defined by intimate communication with God. And even though God is condescending in a sense that he refuses to talk with the other Israelites, he refuses to be a visible presence with them, he still chooses relational speech with Moses. He does not refuse to let Moses go, despite the actions, despite the sins of those around him. In verses 12 to 17, Moses has the bold intercession that I was talking about before. So Moses intercedes with two linked petitions. He asks for confirmations of God's favor. He said, "If you are pleased with me, show me your ways." And then he insists that God's presence must go with Israel. "If your presence will not go with me, do not bring us up from here." Moses actually makes the case that God's presence is the community's distinguishing characteristic and the only reason to continue the journey. So Moses again argues from relationship and purpose. God's benefits through favor and signs matter less than the abiding presence of God. So God's benefits matter less than God's abiding presence. And leadership that seeks God's presence above convenient success actually protects the identity of the community. And God's reply? He will do exactly what Moses requests. His presence will go. Verse 14, the interaction shows that intercession is not merely asking, but actually arguing God back into his promises. Moses uses covenant memory as his plea. Now, there is a sort of belief nowadays that whatever God decides, you shouldn't bother praying or arguing or pleading with God because God has his plan, you have your plan, and you shouldn't try to argue your way into God's plan. But the truth is, you should still, because you should argue, because it actually shows that you care. It shows that you want to be with God. It shows that you have a relationship with God. Name one person you are in a committed relationship with that you do not argue with. Arguing shows you care. Arguing shows that you want the best for them. Arguing shows that you're comfortable with them. You don't argue with people who you're afraid of. You don't argue with people who you are afraid of offending. You're afraid of ruining that relationship. But the truth is that relationship was shallow to begin with if you can't argue with them. Because if you argue with them, that shows that there is a deep foundation that won't be shaken if you do in fact have disagreements. So, arguing with God, pleading with God, taking all your anger, your frustration, all of your pleas to God is actually the correct way of praying. As we saw with I think it's Noah. Who was it in the Old Testament who pleaded with God, who bargained with God? If there's only 15 people, there's only 10 people, would you spare them? One of the patriarchs. Anyway, Moses asks boldly. He says, "Show me your glory." God replies, "I will make all my goodness pass before you and will proclaim my name, but you shall not see my face, for man shall not see me and live." Instead, God instructs Moses to stand in the cleft of the rock. He will cover Moses with his hand while his glory passes by. Then remove his hand and Moses will see God's back, but not his face. Interesting. There's a lot of rich meaning here. Moses' request is the most human longing, not just from gifts from God, but to behold God, to see God. And God responds by saying, God will reveal himself relationally, but reserves his ultimate divine transcendence. That's what he says, "I will show you my back." That's the powerful image here. Moses experiences something of God's presence and movement without the lethal intimacy of his face. You cannot see the face of God without dying. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help you keep up your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. I upload daily, so if you don't want to miss tomorrow's episode, feel free to rate the show and follow. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And always remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.